So as we begin to turn our attention to the class of 2023, today I want to talk about two coaches for the Oklahoma Sooners that I think we need to keep an eye on in the recruiting trail because I think these individuals have already hit the ground running, and one of which we actually haven't had the opportunity to really talk about yet. So before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no. Are you excited now that recruiting for the 23 cycle is really starting to heat up? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content, and you don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, like and comment down below. Those interactions, though they may seem small, they are truly massive to content creators such as myself, and both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all that being said, let's hop right into this. And first and foremost, we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. And the name we're going to be talking about there is Jeff Lebby. Jeff Lebby is the new offensive coordinator for the Oklahoma Sooners, was a hire that generated excitement, especially when you look at the offenses he's fielded both at Ole Miss and at UCF. But it didn't take long for that excitement to translate into the recruiting sphere for Jeff Lebby, because almost instantly after signing with the Oklahoma Sooners, Jeff Lebby's effect in recruiting was felt. First and foremost, there's the obvious, the transfer of Dillon Gabriel, his former quarterback with UCF, coming to Oklahoma. That in and of itself was a major win for the Oklahoma Sooners, something I talked about here recently. That relationship that they have is something you just can't argue with, and whenever you're able to get in a quarterback with the experience Dillon Gabriel has, but more specifically with the experience with your offensive coordinator, you just don't argue with it. So already he's paying dividends, but it didn't just stop and start with Dillon Gabriel. In fact, when we look at what Jeff Lebby has been able to do on the recruiting trail in a short time for the Oklahoma Sooners, it's impressive. And to me, the first indication of this was Nick Evers, the quarterback out of Flower Mound High School in Texas. Nick Evers ranks as a top 10 quarterback, a top 200 player in the nation, and is a high-ranked 4-star. So whenever you have this turmoil and this coaching turnover and you have a new offensive coordinator, to see a high-ranking individual such as Nick Evers pretty much will instantly commit, that showed you that Lebby was someone already generating at least some sort of excitement from recruits. But from there, it snowballed, because then it went from Nick Evers to Jaden Gibson and then Jackson Arnold. So as you can already see, in his short stint with the Oklahoma Sooners, he's already gotten in 3 recruits through traditional means, and then Dillon Gabriel through the transfer portal. Every single one of these recruits are individuals that in the future could be big for the Oklahoma Sooners. Nick Evers is someone who Oklahoma fans are very happy that they get in, not only into their recruiting class, but more specifically early enrolling. Because Dillon Gabriel's a talented quarterback, but you want the depth behind that. And Nick Evers early enrolling, though he's going to be a freshman next year, gives him all that extra time to come in and learn the system, and that could be massive. But even outside of Evers, you have the Jackson Arnold commit, the quarterback in the class of 2023 out of Geyer High School in Denton, Texas, a really high-ranked 4-star, a top 50 player in the nation, a top 10 quarterback. That's a huge win for Oklahoma already in the class of 23, but it's not just relegated to the quarterback position, in which case we've already talked about 3 quarterbacks that Jeff Lebby has got for the Sooners since he's been there. He hasn't even been there 6 months and he's already had 3 quarterback commits. That's why I'm bringing this up, because it's really interesting when you start diving into what he's already been able to do. But even outside of quarterbacks, you're talking about a wide receiver in Jaden Gibson coming in that could be big for the Sooners in a year where they lose 2 wide receivers to the transfer portal. And so any wide receiver help they can get is going to be big. More specifically, when you get in a wide receiver that's 6'5" and a top 300 player in the nation, you just simply don't argue with that. But it's not just simply relegated to Jeff Lebby and the offense. There's a defensive coach who, even though we haven't had the opportunity to really talk about yet, doesn't mean that he hasn't been ferocious on the trail, because he's already gotten 4 commitments for the Oklahoma Sooners, and he, like Jeff Lebby, hasn't even been a member of the Sooners coaching staff for 6 months. And of course, we're talking about defensive ends coach Miguel Chavis, who followed Brent Venables from Clemson. And Chavis is someone who I think is going to be a major win for the Oklahoma Sooners. A former player, he's a young guy, and these younger coaches can resonate with recruits, or at least theoretically, they can resonate with recruits. And we're already seeing the effects of that on the recruiting trail. Because even though Chavis hasn't been there long, he's already secured 4 commitments in the past recruiting class for for the Oklahoma Sooners, and those commitments being Grayson Holton, R. Mason Thomas, Cavante Henry, and Alton Tarber. So automatically, when you're looking at an individual who's only been there a short period of time and he's already securing commitments such as that, that's a name we need to talk about. More specifically, we need to talk about how this is also an individual that has got plenty of positive coaching experience, even though this is his first real on-field stunt, if I'm not mistaken. He was an off-field coach at Clemson, but followed Brent Venables from the Tigers to the Oklahoma Sooners, and he's someone who's gotten to learn under Brent Venables. He's gotten to learn under Dabo, and he's been at Clemson, and Clemson has been a model of success for the most part over the past few years, so you really don't argue with the experience he brings in, and more specifically, you definitely don't argue with the results he's getting on the recruiting trail. So when you look at this with recruiting really starting to warm up in the 23 class, Oklahoma fans have something to be excited about because they have some people on their staff that are already hitting the ground running. But two names in particular that I felt we needed to point out and talk about were Jeff Lebby and Miguel Chavis, because they have already been putting in work for the Sooners, and I'm interested to see where it goes from here. But I'm really interested in hearing from you all. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking about both of these coaches. That's it. See ya.